In this video, we're gonna walk through everything you need to know to set Ninjatrader up properly and have it effectively work for you and not be frustrating. We're gonna go through what data to select, how to set up charts exactly how you want, every little trick and tool that you need to know. I've used Ninjatrader for over 5 years now. And as well, we're gonna go through how to set an ATM strategy up. This is a massive thing when it comes to trading in Ninjatrader, and you will really want to know how to set that up properly so you can effectively enter and exit trades. If you want to skip to something specific, make sure to just go through the chapters at the bottom of the video. Now, first off, if you've never used Ninjatrader before, it's an extremely powerful trading platform. I'll leave a link for you to get started with it below. Now, first off, when you are selecting what kind of trading data to get from Ninjatrader, every trading platform, you generally have to acquire specific data. Now, on the Ninjatrader website, what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna want to go to the top right and go to settings, and then from there, you'll go to plans. And what this will do is you're probably not going to see, I currently have something already going here, but you'll want to see this where you can either update subscription or you'll just see select some kind of market data subscription. Now, the two main options they give you is you can either do, level 1 data or level 2 data. Now, level 2 data is really expensive if you don't actually need that kind of information. And what you can do is this level 1 data for $12 a month will give you every market out there. You can click here to view products, or what you can do is you can go down to customize and you can say and go through each one of these and say which ones you want. They have some crazy, I don't even know what kind of futures data this is at $140 a month. But what you can do is if you don't want to pay that $12 a month and you say, hey, I just want to trade, the ES futures and the NASDAQ futures, you don't even need to get that $12 a month. You can just select that specifically by going with just the CME. And if you're ever unsure what these each have, you can just click view products and it will tell you exactly what's in here. And you can see the NASDAQ futures are in here and also the ES futures and a lot of other markets. And so that's a really easy way to get cheap data without having to pay a ton per month, which is pretty standard across every trading platform. Now, when you first open up the Ninjatrader desktop platform, what you're gonna do is you're gonna just get a window like this. There's gonna be no charts or anything, and you're gonna have to connect to your data stream first. And so what you have to do is you have to go up here to connections, and then you can see I have a couple ones here that are set up already. But what you're gonna have to do is click configure down here, and then there's gonna be a ton of different available feeds here. And so that's what you can do is with Ninjatrader trading platform is you can connect to a ton of different platforms if you don't actually specifically wanna use Ninjatrader as your brokerage. And so when you start using Ninjatrader, they're gonna send you an email with information of how to connect and which one of these to use to connect your data. And then you're gonna have to just have a username and a password. And then what you can do is just click connect, automatically connect on startup, because then every time you open up, you won't have to go up here and say, okay, I wanna connect to the system. And then you can see these green buttons, or down here, this will light up as green when you're connected, and you should see data. And your charts, once you have them up, will start to update. If it's yellow or red or gray, you're having issues connecting. Now, you won't necessarily have a ton of different accounts here, but what you can do is you can click add simulated account, and you can just set them up and make more if you want. Now, one thing on Ninjatrader is the trading platform doesn't necessarily reflect your commissions, and so you need to add what you have. Most likely you have the free version, and then you can also just create initial capital and set up essentially a simulated account, and then you'll click OK and it will make an account for you. Now, to get into charts and how to set up a chart, what you're gonna do is at the top here, you're gonna go to new, and you'll go down here to chart. And what it's gonna do is it's gonna bring up this data series. This is essentially you saying, okay, what do I wanna trade? You're gonna go to instrument. And now this up here is basically a quick look back at what you previously have been doing, but most likely you won't have that if you're starting a fresh system. And so for me, okay, I wanna look at futures. I'm gonna go to futures here, and I'm gonna just pull up the NASDAQ futures. And then from there, it'll populate this area on the right. And what you can do is you can say, okay, what type of chart do you wanna do it on a minute, second, day? You know, you can change it to all the different options you want. You can go based on volume, range. I like to use a minute chart. You can set it up to be a 1 minute chart. And then you can load data based on different things. And so I usually like to just load, 15 days worth of data for a 1 minute chart. It just gives you enough time to zoom back if you want. And then from there, this stuff is pretty standard. You can always go back. I'll show you how to go back and find this. Just click OK. I'm just gonna double click to make it full screen. And the first thing, to get those settings back, you'll see now a ton of buttons here at the top. This button right here, it's called Data Series. It'll bring all those settings back up. So if you ever want to go in here and change things, you can now see, you can start to, there's lines on the chart and stuff. You can start to change those. You can also come in here and actually change the colors of your candlestick bars if you, feel so inclined to do that. I actually normally use white and blue for my candlesticks. I don't actually like trading red and green candlesticks just because they, kind of trigger anxiety or emotions a lot easier. Now, some super quick basic things is you can left click to, drag and move the chart around, but generally it's kind of locked. And what you can do then is hold control. I'm holding the left control button and I can move it around a lot more freely. Now you can see I can move it all the way here. I can go off the screen. Now, if you're off the screen and you want to snap the chart back, there's just this little F button up here at the top right corner and it'll snap you back. And then this arrow here will also pop up if your chart isn't matched to the right side. Now, if you right click on the chart and go down to properties, this brings up other settings that you can do. Now, first off, a big key one is right side margin. I usually have this at something like 200, and the right side margin is just this area right here, basically. It essentially just is, how much extra space do you want there? I kind of like having it a little bit extra space. It helps me visualize things a bit more. And then kind of some big things is you can turn on or off horizontal grid lines, or you can just make them thicker, and most of these settings are pretty self-explanatory, but that's how to do a lot of that stuff. Now, if you ever wanna kind of save a preset, you see down here, you can click preset and you can click save. And so it'll save that kind of as your default chart setup. Now you can always just click and drag on the X or Y axis of the chart too. That's another easy, quick way to move the chart around. Now, if you want to add indicators to your chart, you can click this indicator button up here and you can see there's a ton of default indicators you can add, or there are custom indicators. These are custom indicators I've built for the platform. It just comes in a nice little folder. I can add this one and you can just click, it'll always have all the settings right here, and you can always click pretty much for anything, any drawing tools, any indicators. This template down here, you can always click and then click save as default. And then that'll always be the default that's there, or you can save it as another option. And then you can just click OK, and that indicator will show up. And all that indicator is just a little timer right here, just to show you a countdown timer of where the bar is gonna close. And so I find that super helpful to have, especially trading on a 1 or 5 minute chart. For something a little bigger, it's not as necessary. Now, another important setting is I can click on the right side axis here and go to properties. Now, this brings up properties that are important to use as well. And so one thing I like to do is I like to have fixed horizontal grid lines versus automatic. And so what this does, you can see it didn't do anything because I technically have, if I go back to properties here, I technically have horizontal grid lines off. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna re-show these. I kind of like actually having grid lines on most of the time. It makes things a little easier. But so what you can do here is you can have it as fixed grid lines versus automatic. Automatic kind of just make it kind of look nice. Now, the reason why I like fixed is because you can do it based on ticks, points, or pips. Now, what I like to do is I like to have it based on points. And this is because anytime you open a chart is, and just look at the candlesticks, without an easy reference, it's kind of hard to understand the volatility of the market. Now, if I put in here that I want a horizontal grid line every 10 points, now this is on the NASDAQ, it's gonna show me, grid lines that kind of make sense. This is kind of today's chart, and then if I go back, here you can see the grid lines are a lot bigger, showing you visually very easily that the candlesticks are much smaller and there's less volatility, versus if I zoom back forwards, you see they're very tight. And so there's a ton of volatility going on today. And that is super easy and really important for trading consistently every day, I think, to be in tune with how the market is moving. Now, the next big thing for charts, of course, is drawing tools. Now, if you right click on a chart, you can bring up most of the settings that are up here. Pretty much you can see there's data series, alerts. Another thing here is if you want alerts, you can set up alerts for NinjaTrader. You can say, hey, I want to add an alert, and the condition is if the NASDAQ, you can actually do this based on lines as well. So you can say, if I draw a line here, and you can right click the line, and I can set an alert based on that line, and it will pretty much automatically set it up for you. And I can say, okay, I want to alert if the price crosses below that line. You can, go in here and change it exactly how you want, but that's something super helpful if you are, not actively trading. I want to see this, and I want to come back to the charts if it shows up here. And so what this will do is it'll send an alert to you if the price crosses this line. Now, to go back to this, there's a couple of other settings here. You can have crosshair. I like to put local crosshair on. Just for me, it kind of makes it a lot easier to visualize, especially if I'm looking to enter in a trade. It kind of allows me to easily visualize where I am based on the actual x-axis. And then another thing too here is this is where you can easily get to drawing tools. I find it a little easier to just right click and then pull up drawing tools here. And you can see there's, a ton of different drawing tools. There's your classic lines, pretty much your standard setup that every platform has. And so what you're gonna do is, for me, I like to use rectangles for my support and resistance zones. And so your rectangle is not gonna look like this initially. And what you can do to bring up properties, like every other drawing tool, you can right click or just double click it to bring up the properties. And then it'll bring up your properties, and you can say, for this, I have the opacity really low. You can change the colors. You can say, okay, I want it specifically on just this chart. Or if I have multiple charts, I want it to have it come up on all the charts. And so we'll go into multiple chart setup in a second, and I can show you that more. But again, down here, the template is I save this as default. And so my default is every time that I pull this up, it's an exact setup of how I want. And so same thing with this, the line, any other drawing tool I consistently use has some default setting that I really like. Again, you can also get those up here at the top left. Now let's get into making multiple charts now. So for multiple charts, first off, if you go on the bottom left, you'll see a little plus sign down here. This is if I want to make another tab. And so you can go in here and set up, okay, I now want to, let's use the micro ES futures, and I'll click OK because I think, my kind of default works for me, and it will bring up the micro ES futures. And you can see I have a bunch of saved charts or drawing tools on my chart because they're, it's saved in my system from me actively trading this morning. That's one way to easily make a chart. Or you can right click on this and just say duplicate in new tab or new window. The nice thing about that is if once you have all the chart settings exactly how you want, you can just easily duplicate another one so you don't have to do it all over again, because that's kind of annoying. And so just to bring these two charts side by side now, you can see that these drawing tools are, the same on all charts. But if I select 1 minute on it, it'll only be on this chart. It won't globalize it to all NASDAQ charts. Now, one cool thing to show you is if you go to the top right here, in each of the charts, you'll see two little red boxes. Now, what you can do is this is how you can link the charts via instruments. And so what this does is, I don't know why, but for some reason for me to get to work, I need to put both as red. And so what this will do though, is if I change this chart to the ES futures, it'll change this chart as well. Or if I change it to oil futures, it'll change both charts. And as well, if you want to use something like a super DOM, you can link this as well. So if I go in here and I change to a different chart, you'll see this changes to the ES futures as well. So that's a super nice way. If you have, some specific setup you have and you just want to cycle through things like that, that's a super easy way to do that. Now, when it comes to quickly drawing, I find it really important to have hotkeys. And so what you want to do is pull up your Ninjatrader main window, and if you go to Tools, you can go to Hotkeys. And what you can do then is you can go to, you can do Chart, Market Analyzer, all these other, Super DOM. But for drawing tools, what you can do is you'll just scroll down, and your main drawing tools you'll find here, and you can change them to different hotkeys. I just use F, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 above number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, just because I find that super easy to do, and it doesn't normally mess up a lot of other hotkeys that there are. Now, one thing to save your charts once you have them set up how you want, you need to go to Workspace and then click Save. Now, what you need to do is, if you want to make a new one, just click New here, and it will totally start you fresh, and it will have a saved one that you can start from scratch and go from there. And just quickly to, open up, kind of your main setup, you can easily do that by clicking, that last, whatever you have it saved as. Now, if you ever have any questions about specific things on Ninjatrader, all you have to do is click F1, and it will open up a help window on the internet specifically for that area that you're looking at, and it will give you a ton of helpful tips. So if you ever, if there's something I didn't talk about in this video, which I'm sure there is, you can easily find that there. Now let's get into the chart trader. So if you go back up to chart settings and options, just click this chart trader button, and it'll bring up this side panel. Now this is really important for entering and exiting your trades on the chart specifically. If you want to use the Super DOM, you can totally use that. But personally, I like to use entering in on the chart. Now, if I right click above the chart, it'll give options for buy stop market orders or sell limit orders. And below, it'll do the flip side. So I can click and put in a buy limit order. And you can see here, this is the order quantity that it'll get put at. So right there, I have 4 technically. You can change that pretty easily and, just put in 1 contract if that's what you're kind of looking to do. Now, a couple of important settings before we get into setting up your ATM strategy is just right click on this and you'll bring up properties. Now you can change a couple things in here. You can change the colors around, kind of basic things. You can show P&L. You can also change the length. Now, if I put in another order here, you can change the length that this comes out. And that is just basically by this. I can just double it to 50% in the screen. I kind of like to keep it 25. It keeps it on the side. And then you can change the display units so if I just quickly click buy market up here, it'll fill me an order. And I can change this to, display percentage. Technically the percentage isn't your count. It's the movement in that market. And then, you can change it to ticks. You can change it to points. Points, I think, is probably the most standard, or you can just have none. This is actually what I commonly use on my charts, is just display none, because at the end of the day, I don't want to, think about the money. I just want to try and to be making the logical decision based on, what the chart is doing. Now, probably the most important setting of this is your ATM strategy selection mode. I like to do keep selected, because what it will do is it will select your ATM strategy order every time you enter in a new trade or contract. So it'll allow you to keep them selected, and you can see here it'll separate them. If you want to instead have it essentially select the active one to where they're combined, you can see here, if I do it, it'll add it as 8 right here. And so it'll essentially it'll combine them versus breaking them up. And you can see here, it's only on one specific one. And so that's just a, kind of an important thing to do with that. Other than that though, it's pretty self-explanatory like most things. Now let's get into setting up your ATM strategy. Now you'll need to click down this drop down menu. Usually you'll have none selected, and you just need to click on custom to bring up the parameters for setting one up. Now the basics of how this works is it'll have a order quantity. That's how many contracts or shares, whatever you are trading, it's gonna default to be putting in. And then you can select based on the parameter type. And so that is meaning down here, when this enters in, I wanna have it have a stop loss of, let's say 50 ticks. Now I can change this to, points. And so what that'll do is if I just click OK based on that, and I click buy market, this stop loss is 50 ticks away from my entry. Now, if I go back to that and edit it again, I can also add in a profit target of 50 ticks. And if I click OK, buy market, essentially it makes a bracket order. And this would be essentially a 1-to-1 risk to reward ratio. And so now to get more complicated here, what you can do is you can click add and you can create a second target. And so let's say I just want my first target to be at 1 times my risk and my second target to be at 2 times my risk. And so what you can do here is your quantity, then I can have it be half and half, right? If I'm going to enter 4 contracts, I want 2 contracts to be at 1x and 2 to be at 2x. And then you can see this, it still keeps these together, but if I right click on it, I can move them separately. And so the only way I've figured out to really do that is click increase price, and then we'll kind of separate them, and then you can easily kind of separate them and then move them based on that. So like, let's say I want to move one to break even, and I can. And then what happens is, when this hits, I don't know if it's, to kind of speed things, you can see there, it got hit and it closed out the 2 limit orders here and the 2 stop loss orders there, and I only have 2 left. And then you can, continue to trade based on those. Now, the other interesting thing is if let's say I am changing, like I go in here and say, okay, I'm gonna trade 8 contracts. I had that same custom parameter selected. You can see here, this is broken up in 2 and 2. And so if I click buy market, you can see it breaks it up in 2 and 6. And so how that works is essentially, if I close this back up, you can see the first target is taking most of them, and the second target is capping out at 2. And so this is how, if you quickly change that without changing this, because in real time, it's kind of annoying to go in here and change how you select this, is you can have this to be larger. And then, if I trade 4 contracts, it'll just fill the first one. But if I trade, 8 contracts, it'll fill them roughly, half and half. And let's say I do 10, it will, do 4 and 6. And so it's pretty hard to perfectly break things up how you want. Now, one way to do this though, is that I would say I generally do it, is instead you just have 1 target. If I just click here to remove that other one, and I click buy market, and let's say I have 10 contracts. And so what I do to kind of deal with the issues of it not always breaking things up properly, what I'll sometimes do is I will say, okay, well, I'm gonna put in a limit order of 6 contracts. Now I'm gonna change my order quantity and just manually put in for 6 contracts. And so if I quickly drag this down to try and let it get filled, you'll see it filled there, and boom, this order changed to having 4, and this order changed to having 4. Once that order was hit and closed out, it essentially updated everything else. So you don't have to worry about this essentially still being at 10 and this still being at 10, and you potentially accidentally getting more contracts than you want to get. Now, of course, what you want to do with this is once you have it set up how you want to click save as template, and then I suggest saving it as something that makes sense. How many ticks your stop loss is, or how many, what the risk reward ratio is. Now, one thing you can do too is if you have your profit target as 0, it will only put in a stop loss. That's actually what I do most of the time. And then I will manually say, okay, right click, I have 4 contracts. I want to take half off at, let's say that I would be targeting this high up there because I think that's likely where the market's going to reverse. Now, if it breaks out, this will change to 2 and I can slowly trail things up, right? That's a little more fluid way to play things out that I like to do. But again, as you can see in here, if you click on more, I didn't even really talk about this. There's a lot of different things you can do to have things, trail up basically automatically. You don't have to do it manually. Now, I don't really like to do an automatic trailing stop, but there's ways in here to essentially set that up to do that. You can basically make it so it'll, have a stop strategy right here. If I click custom here, you can see it'll bring up an auto break even. It'll bring up a trailing stop. It can get a lot more complicated than what I've just shown you. But for me personally, I kind of like to keep it simple because I'm, managing based on what I see on the chart. Now, one thing that I think is really important when it comes to trading on Ninjatrader and just trading in general is knowing how much money you're risking per trade. Now, on futures, and when we discuss how the candlesticks can widely range, I don't think it's smart to say, oh, I'm gonna consistently be entering in 4 contracts, because 4 contracts today in this market could be a huge amount of risk that you're not normally used to. And so what I do, and what I've actually built for Ninjatrader, is a risk reward tool. It's called ET Risk Reward. You won't find this natively on your platform. You'll just see the normal risk reward tool. But what I've done is I've kind of adjusted it to where essentially it'll allow me to have, like for me right now, I have a target risk of around $700 per trade. And so you can see, well, if I want to enter in here and put my stop loss, let's say above this little swing, if I want to try and get short, well, I need to trade 7 contracts. And so I need to adjust this to 7 contracts. What this does is it actually automatically adjusts that. Because you can see if I want to then have, a larger stop loss, like if I entered up here and I want to put my stop loss all the way above this swing high, well, to get $700 of risk for that big of a swing, it's actually only 4 contracts to essentially target around $700. And you can see what's nice about this is it automatically updates the order quantity to, based on this adjustment. So you can easily see, okay, where am I, how much am I risking? How much do I need to trade to hit that risk? And then you can see it also has just basic targets in here. 1 times, 2 times, 3 times your risk, how much money that is at this current risk. And you can easily adjust this if I say, hey, I want to trade $100. This market's kind of wide for $100, but you can see here, okay, I could still enter in $100 here, but it needs to be 1 contract. And so this is extremely important when it comes to trading to pay attention to, because otherwise you're just gonna blow your account. Because one day, the size is way smaller and you can see, maybe $100 is, if I zoomed in, because the contracts are smaller, $100 is 4 contracts. But today, $100 is 1 contract. And so that's really important to pay attention to. It's something I highly recommend checking out if you are serious about using Ninjatrader. I'll leave a link to, how you can get this in the description below. And as well, the other thing that I've built for Ninjatrader, I have a lot of tools I've built for Ninjatrader. You can check them out in the link below. But one other really important one, I think, that really improves trading on Ninjatrader is, you have to right click to click buy or sell, right? And what this tool does is it allows me to just hold a hotkey and click buy or sell. And so that's super valuable when the market's moving quickly, or if you just kind of want ease of access. And you can see it adjusts. These tools together are really powerful because I can quickly say, okay, I want to enter in here, I want my stop loss here, and boom, 4 contracts. Or if, because the way this changes, I can easily say, oh, now it's 6 contracts. And so those are super helpful. Now these are custom Ninjatrader indicators, and so they're a little tricky to install. And so how you install any custom Ninjatrader indicator is you go to this main Ninjatrader tab window again, go to tools and go to import. And then you'll go to Ninjatrader script add-on. And so what it'll do is it'll just bring up a folder directory. And what you need to do is you need to then go and find, wherever you put it in your computer and where you put the third-party add-ons you're looking to install. Now, the biggest issue I see with all of them is if you have it located in your OneDrive. You cannot have Ninjatrader files of third-party indicators located in your OneDrive. They need to stay as a zip folder and then placed on your computer in a local folder. If you have it in a OneDrive, the error will often pop up like this, and all you'll see is just a bunch of directory, but what you're looking for is for it to say OneDrive. If you see OneDrive in that means it's in a OneDrive folder, and you need to move it into a local file. Now, just to show you the other really cool third-party custom indicator I've built is just a news navigator, I call it. Is essentially you have a big list here that shows you every news event possible across all markets. You can change it to, just be in the US, and you can see here on the chart as well, it also will give you vertical lines. So when you're trading, you can see that, okay, there's a bunch of news coming out, kind of in the morning, and then there's a couple other news events in the afternoon, and you can see, okay, which news events are important and what to stay away and be aware of, because when you're trading, news is really important to pay attention to. You don't want to jump in a trade, have a news event come out and just, wipe out your trade all of a sudden. So those are really helpful to really, I think, unleash the power of the platform. I've used it again, for 5 years, and over the time I built these because I felt that they just improved the platform and things that they didn't have in the system natively. And so I'll leave a link for all those Ninjatrader indicators in the link in the description below. And if you want a more in-depth explanation on futures trading, because that's what I mainly do on Ninjatrader, check out this video right here. I go through every nuts and bolts explaining the ins and outs of futures, how they work, and how I trade them consistently every day.